Welcome to the Blueprint Breakers podcast. What is a blueprint breaker? If you live your life outside the typical traditional lifestyle blueprint, you are a blueprint breaker. We are here to start a conversation, to assemble resources, and to build a community. This podcast is for empowered women in midlife and beyond who are preparing for a powerful next era of life. My name is Andie A. Palmer. I am your host and facilitator for our conversations. Sit back, relax, enjoy the show. To stay connected, up to date, and to receive all of our free resources and gifts along the way, join us at community.blueprintbreakers.com. Today's episode is all about taking your life back, trusting who you are, choosing what actually makes you feel alive, and figuring things out, even when the path gets messy or uncertain. My guest is Andie Eggimann. She is an artist and a move abroad mentor who helps people reconnect with what lights them up. After 20 years of putting her own dream on hold, she finally decided to put joy first. She downsized, traveled internationally with her family of 7, and eventually moved abroad. And here's the part that I love the most. Their plan fell apart more than once. Jobs changed, borders closed, life threw curveballs. Andie and her husband just kept rebuilding, adjusting, and finding new ways forward. Today, she's living in Portugal, helping others make choices that feel right for their lives. In this conversation, we talk about breaking old expectations, trusting yourself again, juggling joy and grief, and staying flexible when life doesn't go according to plan. Hello, Andie, and welcome to Blueprint Breakers.
Thank
I'm
you for
so
having me.
happy to see you, to see your smiling face today, and the faces of your family behind you. I love
Yes,
that, seeing all your
yes,
pictures.
all my pictures, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm just really happy to be able to have this conversation. And we're just gonna, I sent you a bunch of like thoughts and notes and things that came to mind as I was reading your book. And,
Mm,
based on just what I know about you from following you online and conversations we've had and all that kind of stuff. So I have no idea where this conversation is going to go, but well,
great, I love it, I love it.
I usually do like to start talking about the lifestyle blueprint because here at Blueprint Breakers, that's kind of what got us started is the fact that many of us were given some sort of a blueprint or script or whatever of how we were supposed to show up in our life, what we were supposed to do, how we were supposed to live our life in order to be a happy, fulfilled human woman, etc. What was the blueprint that you were handed as a child or a young adult?
Yeah, so growing up, I feel like I had a lot more freedom to just be whoever I was. I always liked art. I was a pretty creative kid. My parents, I think, just let me be who I was, which was really great, and
Mm.
not everybody can see that. I'm an only child, and so I think with only children, sometimes it's like, whoever you are is great because 'cause you're the only one, you know? There's nobody to compare you to. I really felt more of those pressures when I grew up in the church and, like, my faith was important to me as a teenager, but then when I went to college, I got sucked into a pretty high control type of church situation, and there were a lot of rules, lots of rules about who you could be as a woman and what you needed to do in your highest calling, and I don't know, just a lot of, "Here's the box that you need to be
Mhm.
in." And this is, yeah, this very traditional women roles, and I'm not a very traditional woman.
Did that appeal to you at first though? Was there some sort of maybe comfort or some sort of familiarity or something with having that sort of laid out for you?
You know, I've often reflected, like, how did I get sucked into this? Because I was a very confident teenager and I was a
Uh-huh.
very, like, feminist teenager, and yeah, and I, like, had a really clear idea of who I was and my own beliefs, and I think the more that I listen to people's experiences with high control groups of all sorts, high control political groups or high control self development groups, things like that. There's usually a hook. Nobody joined the high control group on purpose or a high control situation. And I think for me, the hook was my faith was important to me. And so it was like, if you're really serious about your faith, here's how to be more serious. Here's how to really be a serious Christian, or whatever. So I think reflecting back, my faith was a big part of my identity. And so I think for me, I was like, oh, this is a different kind of thing than I've been exposed to. But oh, yeah, they're really like digging deep into their faith and whatever. So I think, yeah, it was because I wanted to grow, to
Yeah.
be honest. And then I didn't realize, like, what that meant, and in that circumstance, and yeah.
So you did end up sort of carving your own way. Like you designed your
Mhm.
own blueprint. That could not have been easy. So tell me a little bit about that, about how you navigated that.
In that context, I felt like I was having to say no to myself and who I was a lot, choosing this path that wasn't the path that I really wanted to choose with
Mhm.
my degree or with my hobbies or things like that, because there was such a defined role. But then I learned in that context to doubt myself.
Ye
Oh, I must just have not really known what I
mm,
wanted. So there was this whole process of not trusting myself and then realizing that made me really unhappy, and it made me always feel awful because I was trying to be somebody that I wasn't, and I wasn't very good at it. I'm not actually good at homemaking at all. So, like, at
wait,
all.
but I thought that wait, what was the name that
Becky
Becky
Homeki.
Homeki? Becky
Yeah.
Homeki
I
in the
tried
book.
really hard to be Becky Homeki. Yeah, and so, like, I spent so much time trying to squeeze myself into this role
Mhm.
that was not a fit, and then I think just the farther I got away from that one particular church, I still was in churches that had pretty defined roles, but we just managed to move away from that, and we ended up in a really healthy place. And I think along the way, I began maybe just leaning more into the things that I knew were true about me, like being an artist or slowly the travel piece, feeling
Mm,
more free to do that, and that was worth pursuing even with a big family. So I think I just started slowly to try and do things that made me feel alive. And yeah, and because we changed church context, there wasn't any more that pressure to not be that
right.
person eventually, but
Mm,
there was a long stint there where I was sort of stuck and just
right.
not feeling like I could be myself, and maybe just feeling like I was wrong for even wanting
Right.
something else.
Yeah, you were sort of judging
Mhm.
your own feelings
Mhm.
and deciding that you were coming up short in some ways,
Exactly.
because you were feeling that way. And
Yeah.
it was good that you had a partner, your husband, who was willing to like flex with you and figure this out with you. I mean, it's one thing having all of this self discovery for yourself, but then having to do it within a partnership, a marriage, a family, and all of that.
Mhm.
What is that like, having those additional layers to consider as you're trying to figure things out?
Yeah, I feel massively fortunate in that way because it doesn't always go well in this process for a woman if, like, her husband doesn't want her to change
Grow?
or grow. Right. Yeah, and I think something that I love about my husband is that he one of his passions is, like, learning and growing,
Mm,
and I think we both are a really good match because both of us we wanna be lifelong learners, and as we read and changed and as we adopted and our family became multiracial, like, we changed a lot and thankfully on the same trajectory. because that's not always a guarantee. So I would say he is more in love with the me who's being really real than the me that was the lady he married, when we
Yeah,
were just young and we didn't really know what we were doing. And we were trying to both be people that we were not.
right.
So we just feel really fortunate and thankful for each other. Yeah. Especially because we just see this is not guaranteed to have this lasting. We've been married 22 years this December. So long time.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Anniversary coming up. I thought it was really funny in the book how you had a text exchange or something with Gretchen, where you talked about travel. Like you sort of predicted your future a little bit with the
Mhm.
travel. Can you share a little bit of around that realization that you had?
Yeah. So I think, at that point, I'm trying to remember exactly what the quote said back and forth. The part I remember about that exchange was her saying, "You should be an adoption doula and you should go, or you should be a adoptive mom whisperer and you should
Yeah, travel the
like
world. Yeah,
support, basically like support people as they go through this big process of adoption."
right.
And, at that point, I think I had taken the travel points course. And
Mhm.
so I had just taken that course and I my mind was blown. Like, "Oh, we can get really cheap tickets and go, like, really amazing places," and we had bought our tickets to China, I think,
Mhm. Yep.
and yeah, so, like, I was just like, "Oh, we could travel the world with our children." Yeah. So, I just remember that was such an exciting time, and I think, my husband and I both at that point were like, travel is really important, especially to me. He wasn't really exposed to that growing up, but he enjoyed it when we would go. And I had this long time dream to live abroad. And at that point, even still, I was just thinking, there's no way I can do this with 5 kids. Like, they have many special needs. They have a lot of things going on. There's a lot of them. I just did not think that a move abroad was even within the realm of possibility at that point. But I was like, we could at least travel abroad. We can prioritize with our finances. Like a few months after that text exchange with Gretchen and I, we downsized so that we could have a significant amount more to put into like travel fund every month. Yeah. So that was really that right around that text exchange in 2016 was really like the turning point for
Mm.
us.
So, living abroad was always sort of like a secret dream of yours? I mean, that's something you had that was in your mind from a
So
young age?
so I was always drawn to the international student, always,
Okay.
and like
Uh-huh.
international people, even as a small child. Like I was playing with the kids who didn't speak English on the beach, like I was just fascinated by
Mhm.
different people, different cultures. It was Yeah, just I was always drawn to the world. And in high school, like I had good friends who were exchange students, and I went to college and I was a cross-cultural studies major. But during that time I was also getting sucked into these messages like that my life needed to be very small.
You
And
you had to stay in
so
this lane. Just stay in
stay in
this
this
lane.
lane. Yeah. Stay in your tiny little box. Yeah, so that's interesting because I did graduate as a cross-cultural studies major, but I would say, like, from being a teenager, probably 16, 17, I wanted to live abroad, and so that was something that I wanted, and then I kept through that process of being in that high control environment, I just kept telling myself, "No, I can't do it because I need to do this," or, "No, I can't do," and then I got married really young and had a bunch of kids, and there we were.
Yeah. Did you have a specific country that you had dreamt of or just you just were excited about going out and seeing the world?
Yeah, not in particular. I had the opportunity to travel to several places. We spent as a high school and a college student, I spent some time in Jamaica. I spent some time in Germany and Czech Republic, now Czechia. Yeah, I just love the world. I
Mhm.
really was not picky. I wanted to go almost anywhere. It was just, I don't know,
Love that.
fascinating.
I
Yeah.
love that. All right, so we fast forward a little bit, and now, you have a family to think about and all these messages saying, "No, you can't do that. It's too much, too complicated," to what the long list of excuses to not do it are there. But
Mhm.
then you started traveling as a family. Is that what sort of opened the door to thinking about moving? Or, like, what did that whole experience look like?
Yes. We traveled in the States and done like camping and things like that. But when I learned about points and I learned how to find cheap flight deals, and I bought the tickets for to take my 5 children to China for their first international trip, as one does.
You
Go
couldn't
big
just
or go
pick,
home.
like, Canada or something.
Mexico. Yeah. No, I could not. At that point, I had been to China already with my husband when we adopted our daughter. I had really loved China. We really wanted our other kids to get to see China and understand like a bit more about where their sister was from and have those experiences. Yeah, when I found the tickets there, I was just like, yeah, we're going to do it. That changed my perspective slowly. So in my mind, we were going to live in a smaller place and we were going to spend our extra money that we were saving on international travel. And we were going to use all my husband's vacation days, every single one of them. And we were just going to travel. And then I think as I saw the kids do really well internationally, which I didn't know how they would do just because, they have a variety of needs and some of them have big sensory sensitivities. And so I wasn't sure how food would be and just airplanes and everything. But they came alive as well in travel, which was really sweet for me to see. And I felt so happy every time I left the States. I felt like I came alive. The way I talk about it is I came up for air. I felt like I was coming up for air every time I left. And so that starts to make you go, that means when I'm in the States, I feel underwater. If I feel like I'm
Yeah.
coming up for air, I'm holding my breath for 9 months at a time in between, whatever. Yeah. And my kids who have developmental delays, at that point in their wonderful special education program, they had learned to read. I didn't feel like I could teach them how to read as just like homeschooling or something, but they had learned to read at school. And so slowly I began to consider, oh, if they can read, I can probably manage their schooling abroad. Before that, I mean, I didn't even know that's what I was thinking in the back of my head,
Mhm.
like, "This won't work." But
Right,
then something about that, I'm like, "Oh, I can just help them move
right.
along at their level as long as
Mhm.
they can read what I'm putting in front of them." And I think that was maybe the last hesitation
Uh-huh.
for me.
How old were the kids at this point?
So when we left in 2019, they would have been 13 down to 8.
Okay. Woof.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
that
and we
that is
had
those are
begun
active ages.
active. Yeah, and
Wow.
yeah, yeah, and we were, I don't know, blowing people's minds. I used to just watch people watch us and, they're, like, counting. They, like, literally will be, like and just, like, trying to figure out, like, how do these people go
How many do
together?
you have?
How many do you have? But they also don't match, and are you a school
Mhm.
group? Who are you
Right.
people, and why are you on the
Uh-huh.
subway in Beijing? Yeah,
Oh,
so
wow.
good.
Okay. So did you take a lot of trips before you decided to move over that 3-year you started with in China. Did you were you
Mhm.
doing it regularly for a few years?
I made it through Minnesota winters by planning really big, epic travel for the summer. So we went to Italy, we went to South Africa via Egypt, like just a 24-hour stop in Egypt, because that was
Mhm.
we were on Egypt Air. We just tried to take as many opportunities as we could. So we spent 2 Christmases in China and Asia. Yeah. So, like, China at Christmas and Asia at Christmas in general just has a part of our hearts. Like, all my kids really like to get, like, bubble teas and things like that in their stockings because
Uh-huh.
we were traveling,
Um,
like, it's a core Christmas memory for them, which
Right.
is cool. Yeah.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
So was there a final push that made you make that decision of, okay, we're not just going to be frequent travelers, we're moving. That's it. It's happening.
We had begun in fall of 2018. I mean, there had been conversations over the years here and there, but we had really begun to try and figure out if my husband could make a transfer with his company because they're an international company. And so I would say in 2018, we were really talking about that. And then I went to the Republic of Georgia with Gretchen for our epic trip together. And in Georgia, I was like, "Ah, this is amazing. I love it here." And it was just this pipe dream that I wanted to live there. I was like, there's this 8,000-year-old wine tradition. There's grapevines growing all over the city. The city is super eclectic, Tbilisi. I just fell in love with it immediately upon arrival in the cab. So then I was like, how do I make this happen? But we were also still thinking of Ireland because that's where the company was and whatever.
Me
So
too.
so I at that point really began looking into remote work for myself because I was staying home with the kids. At that point, that's primarily what I was doing, juggling all the childcare stuff and schooling. And I found out about virtual assistant. Like, I had heard of virtual assistant, but I was like, I'm not organized enough to be a virtual assistant. But when I'm motivated, I can be very organized.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I did at that point, I did a training program and I began making income myself. And because we weren't really sure, like, how it would work with my husband's
Yeah.
job, or at that point, we were thinking, "Oh, my husband's gonna get a transfer and then gonna be living in a more expensive place, so I should bring in remote income." And that really came in handy, even especially when everything did not go as planned.
Mm.
Yeah.
So where did you land?
Where did I land when?
Okay. So at that
Really
point,
important.
okay, so when you said, "I have a dream, I'd love to settle in Republic of Georgia," but then your husband's company was based in Ireland. Did you do any time in Ireland, or did you skip right over that part, or what happened?
My husband and I actually still thinking that this transfer was a possibility. Spring of 2019, we went to Ireland and looked at different cities and just tried to imagine, oh, where could we live if he was working in Dublin? And we really thought that was working out, that was going to work out. And so we were just expecting that. And then a wrench got thrown in our lives. And I think it was in May 2019, our landlords sold the house we were renting out from under us. And they're like, you need to be out in a month. And so at that point, we were like, oh, no problem. We're moving to Ireland in the next few months anyway. Or, like
Yeah.
that's where our heads were at. And we were like,
Uh-huh.
we don't want to sign another lease. And
Right.
so that's when we became accidentally nomadic.
Mhm.
And we hopped around Airbnbs, just like waiting for this to all come together for the summer in 2019, and then it fell apart. So then we didn't have a place to live, and we were living in Airbnbs, and we didn't have a job to move abroad to. So we really didn't know what to do, but I'm very stubborn, and we had really all had our heart set on moving abroad. We really didn't want to not move abroad at that point. We really wanted to figure out a plan and a different alternative. And so I signed up for trusted house sitters and managed to score with my family of 7 a 4-month house sit in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, taking care of a dog. And
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
it was
To Total
amazing.
pivot in another direction. I love it.
Total pivot. And so we were like, that'll be good. That'll give us some time to figure out where we want to go after. And it's like free housing in a different country for 4 months. And it was through winter, but because we were coming from Minnesota, that's no big deal. A Nova Scotia snowy, wet winter was not scary to us. So that was our first stop. And that was a wonderful experience. We were living in this tiny town. It was idyllic. It was very charming. My children got signed up to be the local Christmas tree lot. So some farm came and dumped a bunch of Christmas trees on the lawn, and my children sold the Christmas trees. Like the neighbor just named us, like, oh, maybe your children would like to do this. So it was a really wild experience, and we enjoyed it a lot. And then we, during that time, decided, yeah, we're going to make Tbilisi, Georgia, our next stop. So after we finish this, let's go there. It's a country that Americans can live in for up to a year just with your passport. And that's a really unique thing to not have to do any sort of visa process for a whole entire year. And so we were planning on doing that, and then guess what year it was? 2020,
Oh, so you were still in Nova Scotia when that all had
when COVID.
going into COVID?
Yes,
Oh,
exactly.
okay.
Yeah, so we were about I feel like we did 4 months in Nova Scotia. We were supposed to actually do 5 months in Nova Scotia is how it was, and the owners of the house needed to return, and we needed to, like, quick leave 'cause we were trying to get to Georgia, and so we had our tickets on March 19th, 2020, the day that Georgian airspace shut down.
Uh-huh.
We ended up living in campers in rural Florida in my parents' yard,
Alright. Not
and
international, not abroad, but close to
no,
family during a crazy time.
we were really thankful that they let us come because it's
Mhm.
not really a very simple thing to have 7 people descend on your house, but of course, we had no home. We
Right.
also had no car because we had sold
Right,
everything.
okay, yep.
So my parents welcomed us, and I lost almost all my work except one $500 contract, and my husband had been on sabbatical. It was really a hard time.
Yeah.
It was that was Yeah, so the dream came crashing down, like, once when when the transfer didn't work, and
Yep.
then the dream came crashing down again after our first international stop,
Uh-huh.
and I just remember a lot of ugly crying during that
Yeah.
period because we were really happy in Nova Scotia, and we were really excited about the things that were coming up. It was just a very difficult time emotionally. And, COVID was difficult for everyone, but there was no shelter in place. We're in campers. It was just it wasn't a good, stable situation to be in. And then, of course, living with family, they were so gracious to let us come, but, like, they weren't used to having 7 people at their house, and so at
Right.
some point, I think we were there about a month when we decided, "We love you, and we want this relationship to continue, and so we need to go stay." My parents have a tiny little cabin in Wisconsin, and so we asked, "Can we go stay in the cabin, and then we'll all have some space, and then we'll recalibrate and see what are we doing." At that point, we were building up back our work, and by the middle of summer, we had more stability financially in 2020. But Georgia wasn't open yet. A lot of countries began to talk about digital nomad visa at that time, where they would let in certain people if you quarantined and you had your COVID test before you came, and then you had to spend a certain amount of days. So we were sort of waiting for Georgia to open up. We were able to find a really cheap Airbnb in the UK. So we decided we want to get out of this country. And Airbnbs were like insanely affordable because nobody
Yeah,
was
because
traveling.
nobody was doing it. Yep.
And so we got to the UK about September 2020. And then Georgia opened to us, and we arrived finally in Georgia in November 2020.
Yay! When I was reading that part of your book, Benediction, it made me go look into the Republic of Georgia. I knew of it, but I realized I
Sure.
knew nothing about it. And I was like, wow. Yeah, I mean, this sounds like a really cool place.
Yeah, it's a very special place. I love it, and I recommend
And
it.
and so how long did you guys live there?
We lived there for 18 months.
Uh-huh.
We loved it there. We had some
Mhm.
really wonderful friends there. It was a great place for a family. It was really hard to be that many hours away working on US time zone. So that was a part of it. Also, we had some really big unexpected tax bills that really threw off everything. Just life, where you're like,
Mhm.
okay, this was not the plan. Yeah. And so we realized we needed to be closer to the States.
Okay.
And that's when we began looking into Portugal and the process here, because it's 5 hours different from Eastern time instead of Georgia. At any part of the year, it's either 8 or 9 hours. We were taking meetings at like midnight. It was rough. But also, we needed to be closer to my parents because my mom has Alzheimer's. So
Mm.
we wanted to be like a direct flight to the state instead of a really long process to
Okay.
get there.
And you're in Portugal now. So you've landed, you're settled, you're building a life as a family. How's that going?
Yeah, it's been a really sweet place for us. We're really thankful for Portugal. I never imagined that we would be able financially to live on a beach. We live at the beach, which is something that I never could have dreamed of, really, with especially with a family my size. So that's felt like such a huge gift. It's been very healing to be around nature that much, to be able to walk out the door and see the water. And the life in Portugal feels humane. It feels calmer. People know how to treat other people like humans, just like greeting your neighbors. Or one of the examples that I give, I had to learn to do this, is people will walk into a cafe, like a small cafe, or to a doctor's office, and the person who walks in says "Bon dia" or "Boa tarde." They greet everybody who's just sitting in the waiting room or whatever. And yeah, that's really, I had to adjust to that in the best kind of way, you know? So I think
Hmm.
there's just this centering of humanity here that gets lost in the States sometimes
Yeah.
because of efficiency or because of work culture. People know how to rest a bit better. They know how to take a break. They know how to sit at a nice leisurely meal for a long time. Things that like are just foreign to Americans, I think, just
Yeah.
culturally. It's cultural differences. And I think I've been away from the States long enough that I really appreciate some things from the States. I'm able to see what are the positives about this hustle culture, and entrepreneurship is one of them. Not every culture really values like entrepreneurship or being your individual self. Those are really strong things that I appreciate. And also the humanity and like the just way to appreciate the like little joys of life and slow down and be present. Those are things that I think Portugal is really strong in.
What I love about your story with this is that you really had every reason in the book thrown at you, like every hurdle, challenge, obstacle to not fulfill this dream. And
Yeah.
he and you just did you still made it happen. What do you think it was that you yourself or you and your husband and family unit, like what is it that made you so sort of resilient in pursuing this dream and able to be like flexible throughout?
That is a great question. I know for sure for me, I did the Strengths Finder inventory. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but my number one strength is adaptability. And so when I get excited about an idea, I'm able both to keep focusing on the idea, but I'm able to adapt what it looks like, you know? And so I think it's really paid off for me that I didn't have a very specific dream in mind. I wanted to live abroad. I love cultures. I love visiting all kinds of countries, you know? And so I think I tell people this with travel too, just stay flexible because there's a million cool places that you can go. So, like, you want to travel on a budget, stay flexible. Go to China because the tickets are cheap, or go to this place that maybe you never even considered. So, for me, the goal was exposure to the world for my children, it was living abroad for me. And I think I I like the variety of coming into a new country and seeing like what's at the grocery store and oh, the way that they do this thing is totally different than the way that we do this thing, you know? I mean, even just down to silly stuff like the garbage, you know, you go to Venice and you're like, this is how they manage the garbage here in boats, you know, and here's the delivery truck, but it's a boat, you know. I love new things and like experiencing things. So I think that I was always just sort of able to go, where's the beauty here? What are the positives of this situation? And man, the negatives are really hard. Feel your feelings, be honest about the really hard stuff, but no place is perfect. And I think that's a really strong part of my outlook. And so I think that helped me pivot too, because I wasn't
Mm,
expecting perfection.
that's awesome. That's amazing. So I let's switch gears a little bit and talk about Benediction, your book. I'm curious what compelled you to write it.
Yes. I think I just realized what a treasure I was sitting on with having Gretchen's most precious realizations written down. So it still just blows my mind. You know, for those of your listeners who aren't familiar with my story, my best friend, Gretchen, lived with cancer for 6 years and she passed away in 2023 in December. But 2 months before she passed away, so it was almost, you know, it's been 2 years since we had this conversation. I was transitioning my career from VA to something more coachy. And I really wanted to ask her how she saw the world, how she saw life and what's important in life, and how to encourage people what really matters when life isn't perfect, I guess. And I just, especially transitioning to coaching, I did not want to be a voice that's saying, like, your best life now, like, go live, you know, I wanted to be
Right.
realistic.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to meet people where they were at and help people live a good life no matter their circumstances. Because I felt like Gretchen was such a good example of that. Like, she was extremely limited with where she could live. She was extremely limited with where she could travel. She would have loved to have lived abroad. And she was very limited by needing to live near the cancer center and et cetera. And so I really wanted her perspective and her wisdom on like, how do you live when life is imperfect? And how do you encourage people to think when life is imperfect? I think we talked for 3 hours and I just typed everything down. I wish I had recorded it, but I asked her questions and I typed her answers. And so then I had this document of treasures of her wisdom. I mean, she was one of the wisest people I've ever met. And she had 4 daughters, and so I really wanted to be able to share this wisdom with them. And so I had always wanted to put it in something more than this Word document, and I just wasn't sure, like, how to put it together and what it was gonna be, because it's an interview, so I had to figure out how to make it into a book, but I also just wanted it to be, like, really centered on her
Right.
advice, and yeah.
What I really enjoyed about it was, I mean, there are a lot of things, but it's not sad. It's not a
It's
sad
not a sad
book.
book.
It
I'm always
it
like,
could
"I
it
promise."
could have been.
Yeah,
It could have been, and it was
yeah.
not. And a big part of it was how you were able to center Gretchen and all the things that she's learned and the wisdoms that she's shared, in that last conversation and even previous to that. But also just in your way of storytelling, you just have a really fabulous way of communicating and sharing stories that keep
Thank
it
you.
very like you're one of the things you talk about in the book is the whole blending of sorrow and joy, and you can't numb sorrow without numbing joy. And you seem in the way that you communicate, in the way that you write, you're able to honor all of that equally. And I think that's what made it so easy to digest and to like really absorb. So
Yeah.
I really, I really, really enjoyed reading it and hearing just a little bit of, you know, Gretchen. And it's just amazing how she was just able to get to the root of things. Like,
Yes.
all kinds of stuff would
Yes.
be going on and she just could clear the way to like this, okay, here's what it is.
Yes, and that's why, I relied on her so much for, like, what do I how do I think about,
Just
you know,
all
all
this.
this stuff, all this
And then she's like,
flails, waves hands in the air, gestures
yeah,
wildly to everything, Yeah,
uh-huh,
and she just had such a way, yes, of cutting through the noise and getting to the important thing. Yeah.
right, right. And like, I know when you wrote it, I mean, the world has been a crazy place for a long time, right? And recent years have been really unstable and
Mhm.
uncertain and chaotic and all those things. When you were writing the book, did you realize the lessons that you were teaching that applied to sort of our world situation? Did you make
Mm.
that connection or was it because it was written more from a personal standpoint, but I'm wondering if you saw that at the time?
Yes, sort of. Because as I was reflecting, even before I started writing the book, as I would reflect on the things that I had learned from Gretchen and through my grief process, just reflecting on, I spent a lot of time in that document before I wrote the book. It was really meaningful to me. And because I had lost this trusted advisor in my life, but
Mm,
because I have so many voice notes and I have so much from her just through our friendship, as I would be processing things, I would look back on her notes and things. And I remember at some point, even before I wrote the book, it felt like everybody was living with this sense of existential dread. And I thought,
mm,
wow, like my friend had a really good way of dealing with living in the face of existential dread.
yes.
She lived in the face of that for years. and had to figure out
Yes.
how to like being alive anyway.
Yes.
And that, yeah. So I began to go, everybody needs this, you know?
Yes.
Yeah. Everybody needs this
Yeah.
perspective. Yeah.
I found myself as I was reading some of her words and perspective, I just found myself going, it's just sort of just feeling everything sort of calm down, and
Yeah.
there's hope. There was hope in her words, even as she was facing what she was facing. So yeah, really beautiful.
Yeah. You're not the first person who has described it as like a big exhale to read this book. And I
Mhm.
think just to hear her really honest take on life,
Right.
life when it's hard.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You covered a lot of really amazing themes. Like when you talked about feeling, I mentioned about numbing your feelings and not numbing your feelings, learning to like really feel them in order to have room and space for joy. And one of the things that really hit me is when you mentioned the guilt over
Mm.
experiencing joy and learning how to sort of release that and let go of that was just really huge.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you for sharing all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that was one of the most lasting lessons, not even from that conversation as much, but just that she taught me like, no, when things are good, enjoy them. The hard stuff will come. So when it's good, don't feel guilty. Enjoy your vacation, enjoy your good meal, enjoy your happiness. Yeah. And I
Right.
think that that was so freeing for me.
Yeah. The other thing that you talked about was living your values and
Mhm.
what did you call it? Sustainable goals? Was it sustainable
Mm.
goals? That sustainable goals are not necessarily the type of goals, especially here in America. We're very goal oriented. We're very action oriented. I've always had very ambitious goals. And you talked about a goal is really something that should be just more aligned with a value. Can you talk a little bit about like how you've embraced that yourself?
I remember really I was asking her the question because of the coaching thing, because if you're going to be a good
Mm,
coach, you need to help people reach their goal, you know? And I'm like,
yes.
but what people aren't in the place where they can even think about goals because life is really hard? Or what if their goals are really actually impossible? If Gretchen's goal had been, I want to move abroad with my family, that would have been an impossible goal. And so is that a failure? No. The answer could not be if life doesn't let you, it's a failure if you don't meet your goal. That was the place I was coming from when I was asking that
Okay.
question. And she responded like, goals should be about your values. Goals should be things that you can pursue no matter your circumstance, no matter if you're stuck in a hospital room, no matter whatever. These should be things like, things that are close to your heart, like love your children. Or for me, adventure is a value. And I discussed that in the book a little bit. What do you do with adventure if you can't travel or whatever? You can approach life as a daring adventure. That's where my name came from, is the Helen Keller quote. Life is either a daring adventure or nothing. And I think being able to really understand your own personal values and then apply them in your circumstances rather than being like, I need to make $10,000 by blah, 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 or like these sort of, those goals have a place. But I think that I found it more compelling to think about really understanding my own values and then how can I apply them no matter what's happening in my life at the time. Yeah.
I want to hear from you about now you are helping other people, families, anyone who wants to move abroad. So tell me how that all came about and what you're doing right now with that.
Yeah, that was sort of a surprise. I have history with travel planning and things like that. I've done travel planning packages because I like travel research, etc. So I'd help people with abroad stuff before, but more in a vacation type of situation. And I had begun since probably summer getting questions from people about moving abroad, leaving the state for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's because families are not feeling safe or parents wondering, do I see a future for my kids here? These really hard questions. And so I was starting to get regular questions. And one of the women that I got on a call with at some point was like, I really need a flow chart. I need a flow chart that like lays out my options, and the two paths need to be like, do you want to leave forever or do you want to leave for a while? You know? And so I was like, "Oh, that's a really interesting idea." And then I continued to get questions from people about moving abroad. And one day in the end of September, I got an email from someone asking this question. And I was like, I'm going to make the flow chart today. So I just hyper focused and I made the flow chart. And then I have been posting every single day on Instagram all month, and that was great, but, not getting any sort of big traction or whatever. And then I don't know what compelled me, but I put it on Thread. Hey, I just worked on this flowchart for 4 hours. Does anybody want it? And everybody wanted it.
Oh my God.
Everybody really wanted it. So that was
I guess
just
a lot of
like,
people are thinking about leaving.
yeah, I guess they are. So that was yeah, so I was like, "Oh, okay. People need this right now. How can I make some more resources to help people who are really considering their options right now?" So that's what I'm talking about a lot. Sometimes it's like life shows you what you're supposed to be talking about. So here I am talking about it.
Well, I'm gonna make sure that we link to all your stuff, to benediction, to your flow charts, and I know that you offer additional support beyond that, so they'll be able to find that out through those links as well. Anything else that you would like our listeners to know about what you've learned, where you're going, what you're doing, all the things?
I think specifically for the audience who might be thinking of moving abroad or wondering if they need to move abroad. There's a lot of emotions wrapped up in that. And I would just really encourage people to take a beat and hold in one hand, here's my fears, and hold in the other hand, here's my hopes. These are both real. The hopes are really real and the fears are really real. And sometimes one takes center stage, right? But I just want people to know it's okay to feel conflicted right now, and it's okay to have a lot of feelings. And it's also okay for me, I really needed relief, the underwater thing. And so it's really okay if you're the kind of person who's really sensitive and you need relief, even though maybe you're a person who really cares about justice. And maybe there's this part of you that's, I want to fight, I want to resist. And I think that these are really complicated questions. And it's really important to be honest about them with yourself and also to just realize where you're at and what you need and what your family needs.
Oh, I love that. I love that, Andy. I love that the way that you sort of honor the complexity of what somebody might be going through that's thinking about these things. So, yeah. Thank you so much for spending the time with me today. Like I've really enjoyed getting to hear more
Yeah.
about your story and and hearing more about Gretchen. Thank you for sharing everything with us today.
Yeah. Thank you for making this space for me. It was delightful.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of the Blueprint Breakers podcast, Reclaiming a Life That Feels Like You. And a very special thank you to my guest, Andie Eggimann. Thank you again for listening and sharing this episode with your friends. If you haven't done it yet, please give us a 5-star rating on whichever podcast platform you are using. Have a great week. Keep on breaking those blueprints and rewriting your own.